From a very early age, William Blake had visions. When he was 4, he saw God shove his face through his bedroom window. This was scary. Later, before he was yet 10 years old, he would often take walks from his neighborhood in London, Soho, walk up to a kind of rural part of the city, Peckham Rye. And there one day he looked in the tree and saw the leaves fluttering in the sun. But he didn't see leaves. He saw angels spangling the trees. Another time he saw Ezekiel resting under a tree. We might say today that this is a sign of mental illness, that he is having hallucinations. It is not that. Blake saw with extreme particularity. When he looked at leaves, he was not trying to see the same leaf everyone else was seeing. He was seeing what he saw, what his own non-repeatable, unpredictable, radically idiosyncratic eye saw. So throughout his life, Blake continued to see visions, and he loved them. He cultivated them. Maybe in the same way that someone might take peyote for a spiritual reason, or might take mescaline, hoping that these drugs will pull one out of habitual ways of seeing and open one to a world that is not conceptualized by our minds. This is what Aldous Huxley discovered in his famous book, The Doors of Perception, a phrase that he borrows from Blake, by the way. When he takes mescaline and finds that he doesn't envision outlandish heavens and hells and bizarre planets. Instead, a regular playing card becomes to him something infinitely interesting. This is vision as extreme particularity, as the mind putting aside the concepts it uses to control and negotiate and predict, and seeing the world as it is, raw, naked, not yet defined. This became a key part of Blake's vocabulary, let's call it his philosophical vocabulary. The idea that to see the world through the mental concepts that we use in science is ultimately to reduce the world, its otherness, to self. Whereas to see the world with those categories set aside is to experience the world not so much as it is, but to experience the world as it is to you right now at that moment. And if you are a poet or an artist, this is essential for your craft. In an essay written later in his life, William Blake says the following: "I assert for myself that I do not behold the outward creation, and that to me it is hindrance and not action. What? It will be questioned. When the sun rises, do you not see a round disk of fire, somewhat like a guinea, somewhat like a coin? Oh no, no, I see an innumerable company of the heavenly host crying, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. I question not my corporeal eye any more than I would question a window concerning a sight. I look through it and not with it." This is from a work called Vision of the Last Judgment. What does this mean? It means that when most of us look at the sun, we see a round disk in the sky, and we would probably agree with everyone else that the sun is a round disk in the sky. But for Blake, this is the lowest common denominator of perception. So if we were in a classroom right now and I brought in a plant, a cactus, say, I actually have one in my office. If I brought in that cactus and I said, everyone write 6 sentences describing that cactus, and then I collated all of those descriptions and found the top 5 adjectives, we would all agree that this cactus is the phenomenon that is best described by these 5 adjectives. But you see, that's a kind of contract where we're not really interested in seeing the cactus as it is to each of us individually, but seeing the cactus as it is to the common. This is what Blake in There Is No Natural Religion and other places calls ratio. I'll talk more about that in just a second. In contrast to ratio is William Blake seeing the sun in the sky and seeing what? A heavenly host of angels crying, holy, holy, holy. This is what he sees. Only he might see this. And even though others might say, oh, that means you're insane, he doesn't care because that is essential to his vision as an artist. So in There Is No Natural Religion, at one point Blake says the following: he who sees the infinite in all things sees God. He who sees the ratio only sees himself only. And later he says, if it were not for the poetic or prophetic character, the philosophical and experimental would soon be at the ratio of all things and stand still, unable to do other than repeat the same dull round over again. When you were little, child, you don't yet have language. Someone points out a bird to you. Look at that bird. It's a robin. What do you see? You don't know it's a robin yet. You see the gray black wings. You see the crimson breast. You see the beak. You see the eye, and probably you see in that robin the same kind of excitement William Blake saw in the sun that turned into the angels. But as you age, you learn language and you learn the word robin. And then you know that a robin is a creature that fits a particular definition of robin. And as you go on and on and on with life, you see robins particularly less and less, and see robins more as examples of this abstract concept in your head. Let's call it robinness. So in this regard, you are using a ratio, which for Blake, again, is a kind of mental category by which we translate the strangeness of the world into the familiar. But of course, if I'm only seeing through the ratio, I'm seeing myself. I'm really just seeing my own mind. The only way for Blake to see God is to break through those ratios and see the world in its rawness, in its strangeness, in its infinitely scaled and heterogeneous and varied existence. So if one wants to call Blake a mystic, Blake is definitely not a mystic of the outlandish, the transcendent. Blake is very much a mystic of the here and now. If you see the world as it is right now with keen, acute, specific, particular sight, it will appear to you as infinitely interesting. It will open up to you in that way. So as you read There Is No Natural Religion, think about this idea of ratio versus poetic or prophetic seeing. And you'll also see those ideas show up in All Religions Are One.